Hello and welcome to the Swim Brief. I'm Chris DeSantis. Swim Brief is brought to you by Jersey Wahoo Swim Club. Check us out on VCC. We just had a nice little bump up, Virtual Club Championships, USA Swimming Silver Medal Club, third year in a row. We're ranked 27th. We're excited about all those things. Today, I'm joined by, and let me just as a way of introducing, do you guys know that phenomenon when you're getting ready to put a picture on social media and maybe you are thinking like, let me get a picture with my friends where they don't look that good and so I look pretty good, and like maybe you're looking for your friends that aren't quite as handsome as you. Like Trever Gray, my guest today, is sort of the opposite of that. I don't want to be in a split screen camera with him. He's so damn handsome, and to boot, he's also going to make me look dumb and unprepared, because we had, some text back and forth. Okay, we're going to do this podcast. We're going to talk about some first year college coaches and see what was the impact team result wise. And, I was thinking like it's a pretty contained little idea that we came up with. And this morning I woke up and I had a Excel spreadsheet, which you will see if you're watching the YouTube version, that had 10 years of conference results. And I've been since peppered with thoughts about trends and what do you think? And so how are you, Trever? That's your introduction.
That was long-winded, man.
Yeah.
That introduction was the Excel spreadsheet I just sent you last night. We got to tighten that up and keep it succinct.
I've never been accused of being short-winded.
I'm doing well. I'm here to bump up your ratings. My friend last night goes, well, if you've been on this podcast a bunch of times, it's probably because you bring in the ratings. And I started laughing because I know I don't bring in the ratings.
Well, actually, it's interesting you bring that up, Bo, because recently I've gotten insight into like the demographics of people that listen to this a little bit more. And when I put up a Trever Gray YouTube video, female audience goes up 150% every single time. It's amazing, Trever. It's amazing. You got to give the women what they want, and it's more Trever Gray.
No, jeez. Thanks for embarrassing me.
Yeah, always got to get in one. So listen, I think in a second here, I'm going to screen share. We have two conferences that essentially, I don't want to say their seasons are complete, but for people listening, it's sort of what we're going to do a bit of here is athletic directors put a lot of emphasis on conference results. There are some athletic directors, probably the ones that a lot of coaches like a little bit better, who certainly value how you're doing at the NCAA level, but conference results are incredibly important. How are you finishing in the ACC? How are you finishing in the SEC? Because those are the other schools that these schools are going to compare themselves against. And if you're continually finishing at the bottom of your league, your athletic director's not going to be very happy about that. If you're continually winning your league, they're going to be very happy about that, because it's an easier in many ways to say, we won SECs, we won something, then go, we finished in the top 10 at NCAAs. Like, for people who are outside of the sport of swimming, I certainly think the second statement has less and less meaning. So in that way, we don't feel comfortable. We do feel comfortable evaluating some of these results, even though the season is not over. And that's why we're looking at conference results. And Trever, you've compiled this spreadsheet. You've done a lot of data entry in this. Just before we even get into some of the specifics, what was some of the stuff that stood out to you just in compiling this? Like, you had I'm sure you had some expectations going in, and how did those expectations match up with what you actually saw?
Well, if you look at the long-term trend, so I've been tracking this since 2011, I think. There's not much movement. in the major conferences, yeah, a team will do better one year by 1 or 2 spots and do worse one year by 1 or 2 spots, but really there's no change.
Yeah.
In the ACC or SEC for men and women. There's not much change. So you and I were talking beforehand, like, what do you got to do to move up in the conference? Because if you look at, are you sharing this? I can't tell if your screen.
No, I'll share it now.
So if you look at the top 3, it's been the same for a really long time. If you look at the bottom 3, it's pretty much been the same for a really long time for both the men and women. Yeah, there's some fluctuation, but you can see that a lot of these teams aren't moving too much. And so what is it? What do you got to do? What does a coach have to do to really move up and really make a change in their conference?
And I think that's an important point to bring up because, one of the reasons that a athletic director might make a coaching change is because they're not pleased with the trend of results and they'd like to make a difference in that. And you're right, it is extremely hard, and your positioning within a conference can be pretty intractable. But the whole reason that you elect to make such a significant top to bottom change to what you're doing is you'd like to see this number move. Now a lot of the stuff we're going to focus on is sort of recent history. And yes, it probably can't evaluate this stuff fully. I think probably a 4-year cycle in my mind is pretty fair in terms of when you could actually say like a difference has been made or not. But nevertheless, sometimes you get less time than that. Sometimes pressures intervene. Sometimes the momentum of what you're doing. I mean, I was coaching in the ACC when the change happened at NC State, and that's probably, to anybody's recent memory, the most dramatic change in conference finish. I don't know. You probably have that. If you have 10 years on here.
I do.
Okay.
Have that, yeah.
So let's go down to ACC men, and you can see what was happening. So in 2011, we beat them at Georgia Tech.
Yep. Look at that. Yep.
Right. So they were, I don't know, this is 1, 2,
and the next
3,
year,
4,
and
5, 6, 7, 8th place. 8th place. Right. And then they move up.
But you still beat them. Look at the next year. You still beat them. When did Holloway get hired? What year?
I want to say 2012 would have been his first year.
Looks like he made immediate impact by beating Georgia Tech in 13.
Yeah, and I think also we expanded. You can see, no, actually that's not true. We didn't expand scoring yet. You can see the year. It's 2015, or maybe even 24. I can't tell entirely based on what you have here, but at some point they expanded scoring, and so it's going to be a little hard to compare points from year to year. But you just look at placing, and
2015.
So you have. There's an immediate impact because they have 87 points and they go to 180. That's a lot to improve in 1 year. And it was pretty evident at the time that they were way, way, way better. They were doing so much better in dual meets progressively through the year. I used to tease Braden and Todd DeSorbo and Gary Taylor and et al. by saying like, oh, you guys shaved and tapered for another dual meet, huh? Because that's what people were sort of spreading rumors about them at the time, because they were so good in these dual meets, and they just had swimmers that were sort of existent swimmers on the team that were doing so much better. And you can see that they make this big jump up to 180, then they go way, way higher the next year. The year after that, it's a massive jump. So all of a sudden, 2014, they're almost the NC State that we know.
Yep.
And then they go first. And that one little interruption by Louisville last year, and then back to first. So, it's possible to do. It's extremely hard, but that's sort of an extreme example of the sort of transformation that people are looking for when they make a coaching change.
And I think that proves how good of a coach Braden Holloway is, because there's, a lot of hoopla, and rightly so, over who's the head coach at Virginia, Todd DeSorbo. But you know what? Virginia was already on top for years. And so he already had momentum coming in, where Holloway didn't have any momentum coming in. He built that program pretty much from the bottom up.
Yeah.
which makes it even more impressive. So I don't know why there's not more interviews with Braden Holloway and what he's doing. He's remained, even more impressive, he's remained on top. Despite coaching changes, someone should interview him.
Somebody should get him on a podcast.
Despite coaching changes below him, DeSorbo leaves to become head coach. He's still doing amazing. NC State is still doing amazing.
Yeah. And I think you can give him credit too. He's done a good job always sort of filling out the staff. And that's, one of the reasons, like, we're going to be talking about head coaches here. And it's not that your entire coaching staff doesn't matter. It's just that, it's the head coach is sort of the leader, and they are the person who's responsible for hiring assistant coaches. So if a team has a good overall coaching staff and that leads to a difference in results, well, you've got to give a lot of credit to whoever the head coach of that team is.
Yeah. So
right.
please get him on.
Yeah. So let's go through this one by one. I have and I just want to sort of share my opinion and hear your opinion. And we're going to be pretty sober about this. I know I'm doing a bit of joking here and there, but I am sensitive to the fact that, a lot of what we're about to talk about is people's jobs and livelihood, is on the line. So I'm probably going to be a little bit more serious and a little bit more stick to the facts of what I see here, a little bit less trying to editorialize and guess. And where I do actually end up guessing, I'm going to try to be pretty explicit about that, because certainly, I'm sensitive to the fact that people have their sort of whole lives invested in this. If you're a coach at a Power 5 conference, you essentially probably do have your whole life invested in this. So it's a big deal. And, let's just sort of talk about it. Let's go to the SEC first.
Okay. Men or women?
Well, you have, for the most part, combined programs at this point. A&M is still split up. Certainly you have the single gender women's programs, Arkansas, Vanderbilt. Neither of those underwent a coaching change. So it doesn't really matter. But for my first one, I hope the audience will indulge me in cheating a little bit. And that is, I see what happened in Tennessee in the offseason, even though Matt Kretich is still the head coach, as a coaching change, because from all accounts, whoever the associate head coach is at Tennessee is heavily involved in coaching their men's program. And Tennessee had a great year on both sides. I mean, their women's team jumped from 5th place to 1st place. We just talked about how hard that is to do. But their men's team also improved significantly throughout the year. And I think the interesting thing is, I thought the improvement was way more on the men's side. Turns out their women's team was way more improved. You look up here at the SEC results, you have 2021 Tennessee with 934 points. This year they have almost a 400-point swing to jump up to 1st place. That is crazy level of improvement. And the men were 850 this year, and they had a much more modest improvement to 938 points. But I think, when you have a freshman go 18.5 in the 50 freestyle and everybody, including myself, gets super excited about it, it just seems like a more dramatic improvement maybe than and you thought. What's your thoughts looking at what changed in Tennessee this past year?
We should also have on Kretich to see what he did, because Tennessee, the men, I'm looking at men's Tennessee results in 2020, they were 6th. Yeah. And a couple of years before that, they were 4th. And a couple of years before that, they were 6th again. And so now they're 2nd. So what is going on there? We know Ashley John has been there for many years, so that didn't change. So is it just, is it luck of the draw? Or is Kretich finally, after being there he's been there for 15 years, right? 20 years? Has he finally figured out the formula to keep Tennessee on top now for a long time? Or are they going to go back down to middle of the pack, 4th, 5th after this year? in both the men and women. But it is impressive. We were talking about earlier, why are some coaches maybe more male coaches over female coaches? Why is Sergio doing so well at Virginia Tech with the men, but not quite the women? But Tennessee, both men and women are doing really well. So it is impressive, but I want to see what's going to happen next year and in the year after.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, on a very personal note, I just sort of want to give a shout out. Rich Murphy got elevated to associate head coach there at Tennessee. Is somebody that I knew when I was coaching at Georgia Tech. Probably at that time he was at Dynamo. And if you look back at Dynamo Swim Club in that time, we're talking like 2010, 2011, 2012. They were an incredible club team. And I probably visited Rich Murphy's Dynamo site because Jason Turcotte was coaching one site and Murphy was coaching another at that time, more than any other team in the area. And I think really highly of him. So I am not surprised to see that, given more sort of responsibility and leeway to coach, that you see this kind of improvement from Tennessee. And from what I understand, again, that one of the things that changed was that the previous associate head coach, Lance Asti, who left in the offseason, was only coaching men when he was there. And even though Murphy has more responsibility for men, he also coaches women in his group. So in a sense, they've become more of a combined program than they were, I think. And I think it's had a obviously a great payoff in terms of the synergy of what's going on in results.
Chris, before you continue, did you just say a club coach is now coaching in college and they're successful?
Right. Well, to be fair, Rich Murphy, I don't know what he was first, because he was a college coach before he was a college coach before he was coaching at Dynamo. So he's coaching. Okay. He was an assistant coach at Auburn. He's been around.
You worried me because we can't call it. Club coaches cannot coach college. We all know that in the comments section at Swim Swam.
Right. Yeah. They can't. There's no way that your average club swimming coach can pass the 40-minute open book 20-question NCAA recruiting test that defines whether or not you're a club coach or an NCAA coach. So it just that mountain is too much for, you know, the simple minds of most club coaches to surmount. And
you just gave club coaches a lot of hope there, but now I'm glad we brought it back down.
Right.
He was a former college coach too. So
yeah. So he had experience passing the 20-question open book
good
test, you know, where you could literally just sit there and look up all the answers.
We can keep status quo now.
You don't even have to get 100% of the questions right. I think you only need an 85% to pass. So you only need to get 17 out of 20 to pass. And I digress. Yeah, you're right though. And I will say the other thing that happened in Tennessee is that actually on that grounds, Credich hired a club coach as an assistant coach in the off season. So
I remember the comment section was people were like, "That's a bad move."
Well, again, if you're making your decisions based off Swim Swam comment section, you're probably in trouble. And to give credit, I think he's always had more creativity in hiring than pretty much anybody else. So he's never been afraid to zig when everybody else is zagging. So I get the sense that he does not care at all about whether you have quote unquote college experience.
Right. Yeah. I'd like to know if he's figured out the Rubik's Cube of college coaching.
Yeah. He must have a special training course where he trains them on the exam, you know, just anything else you want to say about Tennessee before we move on?
No, let's move on.
All right. I'm seeing up here again on the top of the men's one, Florida. Yeah. Now, Florida, in my mind, also made a coaching change in the offseason, right? They were a split program. And they went from split to combined. So Anthony Nesty is now the head coach of Florida women. And you can see here, based on the trend, we're looking at men's results right now. Florida men continue to roll. This is all I can see on my entire screen is Florida winning SEC championships in men's swimming. So that trend continued right away. Let's look at what happened here with the women.
So good job, Nesty, keeping up that tradition there.
Yeah. You have actually the previous 3 years, they were second. This year they were fifth.
Yeah.
What do you make of that, Trevor?
I don't know. I don't know enough about Florida to make a guesstimate about that. Do you know anything?
I mean, I know that you don't want to go from second to fifth.
No.
In the SEC again, because as we outlined at the beginning of the podcast, it is hard to make big moves. You might see a sort of a 1 or 2 place aberration for a year, but this is
that's a big drop.
This is a big drop.
Real quick, I just noticed that in 18 and 17, Florida women were 7th. So they seemed to bounce, or even under Greg Troy, the women were bouncing around.
Yeah, they weren't that good at the end of that tenure. And it seemed like Papel was getting pretty good results. So it had that team on quite a rebound track from that point forward. And we'll get to him later because he's taken over South Carolina.
Yeah.
But you know, I think for all the amazing publicity, like, again, we talk about hype. I discussed Tennessee in terms of like the hype tells you their men's team is so much better. It is better, but not a lot better. And the hype would have you believe that this Florida coaching change has been overwhelmingly positive. Katie Ledecky's there now, and Dressel is you know, coaching with UF and all this stuff. But the results in terms of women's swimming tell a different story.
Yeah, I don't have any more comment on why. Sorry, man. I'm not up on Florida. Ask your you know, your weekly podcast with
Those guys don't know anything.
Hey, Eric has some good insight. Both of them have some really good insights.
No, I'm just kidding.
I'm really impressed.
But you know what? They don't listen to the podcast, so they'll never hear this part.
They'll never hear it, right?
Yeah.
The compliment.
They're not like you. You listen to me. You listen to my dulcet tones while you fall asleep every once a week. Okay, let's get to the next one, and that is Alabama.
Alabama. Coach of the year.
This one off.
Coach of the year, man. She did great. Margot Geer did great. She not only maintained Alabama, they moved up from the Coley Stickles era. How did she do that? Now, some people might say, what's Ozzy? What's his name?
Ozzy Cavetto.
Cavetto, yeah. They said, well, he's the holdover. He probably held it together. But no, you got to give Margot credit. You got to give her a lot of credit for doing what she did. That's impressive. Yeah. Really impressive. So because not only did she bring the women up, but she brought the men up as well.
I got to eat crow on this one because I think I probably was much more reserved about it publicly on this podcast, but I remember, a lot of text chains at the time being like, is this going to work? No, like no coaching experience, almost no coaching experience, being hired to coach a SEC program. And at least you can say, again, we're going to know much better in 2 or 3 years. You're going to have a much better picture of what's happening. But the 1 year prospectus is it made only a positive difference for Alabama to elevate Margot there. You can see here, again, this is women's results. They had about 65 more points than a year ago. They moved up from 4th to 3rd. And if you come down to men's results, they went from 5th to 3rd and had almost 100 more points. So
Yeah.
improvement across the board. You bring up Ozzy Cavetto as well. Maybe he set himself up for for whatever's going to come next in the head coaching carousel here in this offseason. But all credit to Margot Gear for doing no small task. I feel like there were sharks in the water for her at every turn of this season, and she seemed to just navigate it beautifully. And they swam well all year. They built some really nice momentum off Ryan White and her Olympic campaign from the summer to sort of be a leading force there on that team, and they just did great.
You know, Margot is smart, obviously, and she couldn't not have been oblivious to the criticism of her hiring. She had to know about it,
right?
Which probably with most people would have made them so nervous and anxious. But she held it together. Yeah. I'd like to know what her support system is and who she relied on to, so-called keep the faith that she does have the ability to coach, obviously.
Yeah.
Kudos, Margot.
Great stuff. Okay, as we continue down this, we got to talk about my boy, Ryan Wakamerka. He's been on this podcast a couple of times, and I was really excited for him this year because, as far as I can tell, he made a gigantic difference at Auburn.
Yep. Men moved up, women moved up.
Yeah, so you see here, I'm looking at the men's results. They were 8th a year ago, 671 points. 6th this year with 827. So looking at like 150 point swing at men. And if we come up to women, they were 9th a year ago with 510 points, and they gained it 74 points to move up into 7th. So a nice 2-place bump on both sides. And, I think they swam well throughout the year, just as somebody who watched their results. Because I'm looking for a bit of that NC State trend, right, Trevor? That thing I described, where you can just see like that it's not just necessarily, because I guess I think sometimes when changes happen, you can hear, maybe not directly from coaches, but third hand or something, this excuse that like, oh, well, there's just nobody good on the team, and it's going to take us a while to get things turned around in recruiting and this, that, and the other thing. Yep. And maybe that's true in some cases, but I like to see somebody who just sort of comes in and you don't hear any of that. And you just see swimmers that were on the team a year ago that were maybe not performing as well as they could, and they just did a lot better. And I think that's a real story of Auburn. And I'm excited to see, I think they've put together some good recruiting, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, me too. It seems like Ryan knows what he's doing. He's taken that success at Houston and brought it over to Auburn. He's got momentum, so hopefully he can keep that going. So it seems like the SEC is going to get more competitive.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I was struck too, because I thought they were doing so much better. And I kind of mentally thought like, oh, well, they'll move up more than a couple spots, but it's also true that it's sort of so competitive. Yeah. And even that said, I think they're going to have a harder time moving up from where they are right now. And sort of the tough part is cracking in. Like I'm looking at women's here, you can see that there's just a tier when you go from 6th to 5th.
Yep.
So
300 points almost.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
That's a chasm to jump.
Yep.
So it may be that, if they have a very good year next year, that they can leapfrog Texas A&M and get into 6th place. But then I think it's going to be a grind to crack into that top 5. And that's where we're really going to see sort of whether that's impressive or not. And scroll down to men's.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
While you scroll down, I was going to say Alabama went from 700 points up to 1,000 points. So almost a 300 point gain, which means a large majority of the team is getting in that B final and scoring points. That's even more impressive. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a big one. The men's one is definitely doesn't have the same sort of tiers in it. Like you just have Florida way out in front, and Auburn's actually relatively close to Tennessee in second.
Yep.
So in that one, they have a bit more hope that if they really sort of fire on all cylinders next year, they could theoretically move all the way up.
And if you look at the men SEC, yes, it's almost a 100-point difference between second and sixth. So that anyone could take that second place next year, maybe.
Right.
And the same thing, that trend continues in previous years, where except for 2019, where Missouri was second with a bunch of points. And I know we'll talk about Missouri here in a second.
Yeah.
So SEC second through fifth or sixth is going to be pretty exciting next year.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Next SEC school on here, Louisiana State.
Yep.
Had a coaching change. The offseason, Rick Bishop taking over there. Looking at women's results here, you can see there was a positive trend in women's results for them. Last year they were 10th, 390 points. This year they were 8th with 541 points.
Yep.
And another thing that this reminds me of as we get down here is it's one thing to just look at the raw totals of points, but I also think that the reality is when you're in 10th place, you almost have to also look at like percentage point increase.
Yeah.
It's much harder to go from 390 to 540. I mean, 390 means you have a team where you're bringing a lot of swimmers that don't score at the meet.
Right.
And now they have a lot more swimmers that score at the meet. That they have to have that in order to do something like that. And it's not easy to either get swimmers that are existent on your team from non-scoring to scoring in the SEC, talking about, the most competitive conference in swimming, or to convince recruits that, can score in the SEC to come join your team that doesn't field, a full complement of SEC scorers. So credit to them on that front.
But the men, however, if you look at the last few years to even to 2017, so it seems like there's a culture at Louisiana State of being last or second to last for quite a few years, and that trend held. So it's probably going to be a little bit more difficult to change the culture in the men's side than it is the women's.
Yeah, and that's interesting you point that out because, again, based on excitement, you would think there's more going on the men's side simply off Brooks Curry. You just have this sort of one athlete who is absolutely exceptional and could win an NCAA title this year. But the overall trend of the team, you're right, is fairly flat. They did score more points than a year ago, but that was less points than the year before and fairly sort of the same as the year before that.
All the way back to 2014, actually. They've been last or second to last.
Yeah. That's
what year is Brooks Curry? What year is he?
I
don't know. Is he a junior or senior?
This is fascinating stuff if we look it up live. Brooks Curry.
Because, man, if I was the coach, I'd be using him as a
he's 21 years old. So
he's got to be senior.
He's probably a junior or a senior.
Yeah.
He's a junior. So they have another year with him.
Another year. Okay. So they should use that momentum. Obviously they're trying to. Hey, and by the way, some of these college websites are awesome and some not so great.
What have you seen that's not so great?
And I think there's a correlation with how you place in the SEC and the quality of your website. Like Tennessee's website, top notch.
Yeah.
Some others, not so much.
Well, look, again, we're talking very specifically about coaches here, but one of the reasons that these programs finish where they do is the institutional sort of infrastructure. Yeah. Absolutely. And some places just, have a better system for sports information, and like That's like kind of like the making your bed of college sports.
And potential recruits are looking at these websites, and if one website's better than the other, that's going to implant in the brain like, well, the team's probably better.
Right. Or if you can more easily find the information you're looking for.
Right.
And I think it too, doing well over time certainly helps to improve the quality of your sports information. I mean, I was on I won't mention the college teams yesterday, but they're a team that traditionally has done very well in their league. And I found so much information on kind of an unofficial thing that was linked from their sports, from their official athletics website. And, it's just obvious that people who swam there are really proud, and they've put in the time and effort to collect data and sort of just record the history of things. And that's, as a history nerd, I love that stuff, because I always want to look back and sort of see what's going on. Okay. Another team that changed coaches in the SEC was South Carolina. And we're looking at men here again. And they stayed the same in terms of placing. They scored a lot more points. It sort of shows you what a miserable year South Carolina had last year, 232 points. When you think of the fact that you're essentially guaranteed points for legally completing a relay.
Right.
And in a league where there's, I don't have to do the math right now, but in a league where there's 10 teams, so the worst you can finish is 10th, and you're talking 64 points for first in a relay, because it's a 24-point scoring. So maybe you're going all the way down to 30 something points per relay, and there's 5 relays. It's pretty hard to only score 232 points in a meet like that.
It's easy to say, oh, South Carolina got last, what a bust the new coaching staff is. But if you take that, like you said, percentage of increased points, well, then that's a win for them.
Yeah.
So
now it's actually looks like possible that they could, based on where they were last year, it seemed almost impossible that they could move up.
Right.
Right.
Which it was, but they're within striking distance of moving up now.
Yeah.
Yeah. What about the women? How'd they do?
Well, the women also had a significant jump, and they were able to move up a spot. So you can see they're at 276, and they moved all the way up to 460, and are now sort of in that tier. They're knocking on the door of Mizzou.
Well, even Louisiana State, 80 points, that's doable in a year.
For sure.
Yeah. So, it's easy to say South Carolina bust, but they're on the up and up.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is all positive news for anybody that cheers for South Carolina, or if you're Jeff Papel, even as much as it's probably not fun to have a, last place team in the men's SEC, you got to be encouraged by some of this stuff. And honorable mention, I guess, in a negative way, to Mizzou here, because this was a team, that didn't have a coaching change here in the offseason. But what really stood out to me was the slippage in terms of league placing, and then the SwimSwam, to give credit where credit's due, these box scores that they compiled after the meet, I thought were extremely helpful in doing some of this analysis and showing that Mizzou, on both men's and women's swimming and diving, had 0 points scored from a freshman or sophomore. And that's
troubling.
That's not good. That's my professional analysis. I don't know what you think, Trevor.
Well, I think Grievers has his work cut out for him. And I'm sure in the offseason, they're looking at what they could do to at least stop that downfall a little bit.
They need to turn it around in recruiting immediately.
Immediately. And it is interesting that Greg Rodenbaugh, pretty much got fired from Missouri, goes to SMU, wins, gets coach of the year. Very interesting development there.
Yeah. And again, hype. One of the things I think we're doing on this podcast is bridging the gap between hype and data. I remember when Greg Rodenbaugh left, and there was like a lot of hype around how good Mizzou was for like a month or two, right? And it seems like that hype has fizzled out.
Yep.
And now we're dealing with the reality of competing in the SEC and what they've got to do to get to the next step. Any other stuff from the SEC that
I just want to make a quick comment about hype versus negative publicity, and there's probably zero correlation, but Margot gets a lot of negative publicity. Some other programs get a lot of hype, including South Carolina, and look what happens.
Right.
I'm a real big Margot fan, and I hope her success continues. The other thing is, we saw in the transfer portal, Arkansas had a lot of swimmers leave, and that didn't help. They're on the bottom here again. How many points did the women lose in Arkansas, or did they stay the same?
No, they lost almost 200 points.
Yeah, so all those transfers did not help. I'm curious what's going on there. I don't think there was any new coaches.
No, they have Neil Harper as their head coach, and
he's been there a long time.
And Petra, who was the former head coach of Rutgers up here, was the assistant coach.
Which you interviewed, right?
No, I didn't. I never had her on this.
Oh, I thought you did. Yeah.
I wrote something about her when she got terminated at Rutgers. And then I sort of recanted a little bit of it. So
I get the Stony Brook and Rutgers stories mixed up.
Yeah.
Because they were similar. Yeah.
I did have the then coach from Stony Brook
on. That's what it was.
And of course, Petra successfully had that lawsuit against Rutgers and managed to secure a big payout. So it's just a mess on all ends of it. But yeah, not a positive trend for Arkansas. You can see looking back, they've never been like done really, really well at the SEC, but they've also, it's been a long time since they were 11th. If I had to look back here, I guess 5 years.
Well, in 2013 and 14, Arkansas was 6th. So it looks like that's the best they've done in quite a while. I wonder
if that's when Papel was coaching there. Somebody would have to fact check that live here as we record that. I don't have my exact dates on when Papel was coaching at Arkansas. Any other SEC thoughts?
No, that's it for me.
Okay. Let's talk about the ACC where we basically don't have any coaching changes to discuss. We have some assistant coaching changes. You have, of course, I guess I have to mention Notre Dame, but we can't really, it's never good. This is another obvious statement. It's never good when your coach gets fired in October of the year.
No,
that's really hard. That's a really, really hard situation to deal with for anybody. They slipped back another place. They had slipped the year before that in terms of results. Actually, if you go back to 2018, they were fourth.
900 plus points, and now they're at 400 points. They've lost half their points in 4 years.
Yeah, and it's been my old stomping grounds, Georgia Tech, that seems to have swallowed up the majority of those.
Well, the men, yeah, the women, not so much on Georgia Tech.
Hey.
So you've been there. Is Courtney more of a women's coach or guys coach? Can you comment on that or no?
I guess I did on Courtney's behalf always bristle at the fact that one of my most annoying trends in sport is, and we see it more in swimming because we have these combined programs, right? So you just end up with there's very, very few women, for instance, that are coaching like men's basketball or men's football or whatever. Like we do have sort of more of that in swimming. And I remember I was there from beginning of Courtney getting hired, and immediately, even by our own sports information department, she was getting questions like, yeah, but can you coach men?
Right.
Which is like, does anybody ask?
Can men coach women?
Right. No, basically no. Or, I think I even teasingly asked Ryan Wakamerka when he took over Auburn, because he's been coaching the women's only program, but can you coach men?
Funny.
Just because like it's not a question that gets asked. I would say in the instance of Georgia Tech, it is there's an uphill climb there in terms of getting a women's team up to the same level that the men's team is. And it has to do with the institution. I mean, being a technical school, I don't know what the gender numbers are right now in terms of student body, but when I was there, I want to say it was about 65% men undergraduate student body and 35% women. So just by that virtue alone, like recruiting was always much easier for men. You're just a much bigger pool of people of high school boys that were interested in swimming there. That's not to say that it's impossible. The other factor is, and probably a lot of people know this, but the women's team is about 80 years younger than the men's team at Georgia Tech. The men's team has existed since the 19-teens. I want to say 1918, so very old swimming and diving program. The women's team was started from scratch in the mid 2000s. So they don't have the same
pedigree.
Yeah, they don't have the same alumni base and everything else. I mean, there's a big group of really proud, really well-off men's swimming alumni that have done a ton to keep Georgia Tech swimming going. Because I don't think that institutionally they are very supportive of that swim program. They have this wonderful pool that they got sort of half gifted from the 1996 Olympics, and there's some more donors have paid some money to enclose it and always keep it sort of 100% top notch. And those same donors have, I think, funded most of the scholarship money that Georgia Tech is handing out.
Interesting.
They don't pay anything to rent the pool, so the expense to the school is very limited. And I think that's the way Georgia Tech institutionally likes it.
Yeah.
They like to get something, but they don't want to give a lot to that swimming program. And I think it's a shame because the place obviously has a lot of other factors going for it that I think mean it could be really good. And I've heard really good things in recent years about the hiring of Michael Normant. He was a club swimming coach. Hey,
Yep.
Another one, Trever, a club swimming coach. Maybe I'm just biased now that I'm a club swimming coach. I used to be, now I just notice all this stuff, but he was a club swimming coach in the area when I was coaching at Georgia Tech and always doing an excellent job.
Is he coaching men or women or both?
I don't know enough to tell you that.
Yeah.
I don't still talk to anybody that coaches there. So I couldn't tell you, but I do think he has something to do with the flow of even a couple of these older pros that have gravitated towards Georgia Tech. And I think it's probably helped them too in local recruiting to have a respected club coach that, has relationships with the other coaches in the area, because they have a really good club base to draw from.
Yeah.
In terms of Swim Atlanta and Dynamo and Chattahoochee Gold and Marietta Marlins. I'm trying to remember all my, I'm going to leave somebody out and really offend them. But, there's a lot of good teams in the area, and not all of those kids are going to go to Georgia. So, there is a big opportunity in that respect. Anything else from the ACC you noticed?
Well, I think I did want to comment that, Pittsburgh is more, more towards the bottom, both men and women, right? And
Yeah.
I think is Chelsea Bailey the coach at Pittsburgh?
The head coach?
No, she's assistant coach, and she
Yeah.
just got there in the last couple of years. Is that correct? I could be wrong on that. In fact, I would need to look that up.
You have here in your notes that they hired an associate head coach, Athena Miller, in the offseason.
Oh yeah, here it is.
They had, is this correct? Okay. Assistant head coach Kevin Arakaki, or is he just an assistant coach?
He's an assistant coach. I did not put any volunteer assistants or graduate assistant coaches in this list.
Yeah.
Man, where was that? You know, it was a women's only team. I know that. Oh, it was Vanderbilt. Yeah, Chelsea Bailey's at Vanderbilt, and I worked with her briefly at Seattle U, just very briefly, not much at all. So, you know, Vanderbilt's been in the bottom of the ACC. Well, every year since last year.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, that is the SEC, and we're on the ACC. Sorry, never mind. No one's listening at this point anyway. This long in the conversation, no one's listening.
Any other ACC?
Yeah, sorry. Nope. Duke, you know, they're fifth, but they've always been in the middle. I thought maybe they had some momentum, so it'll be interesting to see what they're doing there. I don't know anything about the Duke program, but fifth place, you know, it's pretty good. They gained an extra 60 points. So I'll see what Duke does.
I think Duke is a little swim program that does a lot with a little. And
yeah,
again, I know a little bit more about the ACC than some of these other leagues. I think that you look at their men, they're typically towards the bottom of the ACC, but I think they have very few scholarships funded. I think they're way, way below the 9.9 that you're allowed. I don't want to speculate how low, but I've heard various guesses that are less than half of that number. So that definitely puts them up against a big challenge, competing against any of these other schools, with the exception of Boston College, who, as far as I know, fully fund men's swimming and diving in terms of scholarships. But their women's team, I believe, is either fully funded or closer to fully funded, and you can see what Dan Colella can do there with that sort of support. He always gets kids to improve when they're there. And again, facility wise too, they're at a disadvantage in this league. If I just go down, Virginia 50-meter pool, NC State 50-meter pool, 50-meter pool, 50-meter pool, 8-lane 25-yard pool. For Duke, 50-meter pool, 50-meter pool, 50-meter outdoor pool, 50-meter outdoor pool, the 1996 Olympic pool, 50-meter pool. And Boston College, the school that had an 8-lane 25-yard pool with a diving well and decided to upgrade last year to an 8-lane 25-yard pool without a diving well.
Oh my God. Nice.
Which tells you everything you need to know about why Boston College finishes at the bottom of the ACC.
So Duke, I mean, kudos to the coaching staff there, because they've been fifth or sixth for 5-6 years now. So really nice maintenance of the placing, not moving up, but not falling either. So with limited resources, they're doing great. Yeah.
No, and I think too, like that they have less assistant coaches than a typical ACC program. They're a place that does a lot with a little, for sure.
I'm glad you brought that up, because when you look at the websites of all these colleges, some programs have 20 people on staff because they're putting the psychological advisory person for the team, and the nutritionist for the team, and the strength training coach for the team. Whereas some of these other schools have 2 coaches on there, a head and assistant, and that is all they have on there. So it's not an even playing field at all.
No, and I think, look, having extra bodies it's not everything. I do think that there are a lot of fully staffed power conference programs that don't do great things with their 5th or 6th coach on the staff, and don't really know what to do with that.
What to do with them,
amount of personnel, and would be better off having one less and having better quality people in those other positions. Like, it's not everything, but having coached, for instance, when I started my college coaching career, I was at the University of Pennsylvania. We had 2 full-time coaches for a combined team. Right. And that's not a lot.
No, it's nothing.
What that means is you just end up with situations where you don't have the coaching coverage to where you can say we're honestly giving it our best with every single kid that's on this team. You know, that you're cutting some corners when you don't have quite enough. So I think it's impressive that they're able to get so many people to swim well, despite being at a disadvantage in terms of support.
Yeah. So last thing, I know no one's listening, but North Carolina.
Stop saying that.
North Carolina, we got to talk about them. I think they have the most impressive staff going for them right now. And I think they're on the
I can't wait to talk about this, by the way. So
they went from 500 points to 700 plus points. So almost 200-point gain. I want to see what they're going to do in the next couple of years. When did Gangloff take over?
So this was his third full season.
Okay.
And that was a women's, sorry, we're talking about women's. So you have the women's results.
I got the women's results up, right?
Yeah. No. So they were at 516 and 8th place, and then they went up to 4th place. Interestingly, in 2020, they were in 4th place as well. So that would have been his first year. So it's 4th, 8th, 4th. And that's again why you got to look at some more long-term data, because like if we'd done this last year, we would have been like, oh my God, Mark Gangloff, you know, the team
disaster.
It's a disaster, right? You know, and they seem to have sort of a bounce back. The year before he started, they were in 7th. So they had a nice bump sort of in the first year. If we'd done it that year, oh, what an amazing difference. So I think, you know, collect some longitudinal. And then if we look down on men's, a year ago, they were 6th and they actually lost a couple hundred points into 7th. So, you know, stuff is a little bit more mixed. I can remember when I was in the league, they were sort of locked into that. If we look back here, they were, 2011, they were the 2nd place team, and they were sort of consistently the 2nd place team to Virginia in those days. And then that sort of started to wane a bit.
And who was the coach back then in 11?
That was Rich DeSelm.
Yeah. Okay.
Who retired, and Gangloff came over sort of around the same time the shakeup at Mizzou happened. He was coaching over there.
Yep.
It's interesting you mentioned he's put a couple PhDs on the staff. I think you were going to get to that. I think his wife has a PhD in psychology as well. Don't quote me on that. Yeah. I remember meeting them way back when Mark Gangloff absolutely ate my lunch at a Masters Nationals in a 50 breaststroke.
Of course he did.
But what impresses you? Because I want to interrogate this a little bit.
Yeah, what other program has 2 doctors on the team, you know, pretty much experts in their chosen field coaching, and you know that knowledge is being applied. So, you know, I really think that I do think that's a bonus. Some, you know, how some coaches, you know, Eddie Reese, greatest coach ever, has no doctorate, so there's no correlation there, but you know that information is being imparted on the swimmers, and it's got to help. So I'd like to see what the trend is over the next couple of years with North Carolina, and I'm going to guess they're going to be on the rise.
Yeah, you deflated my counterpoint, but I do think I would caution against the intellectual snobbery here of insinuating that people with fancy degrees, you know, that makes them any better at coaching. But
Chris, both you and I have fancy degrees, so you know that we're better coaches because of it.
No comment. But I've certainly, you know, it's something different, and I think too, like I'm interested in it from the angle of I want to see what Kirk Grand is doing, because I see more similarities in my own life. Like I know that he has left some high profile coaching positions, not because, he was fired or he was necessarily unhappy doing them, but, because he's married and he has a wife with her own career and her own interests. And, she can't just be in whatever random college town, would have him as an assistant coach at that point. So maybe there was an opportunity, sort of a bit of synergy with his family life, that he can be there at North Carolina. And I'm interested. I would love for that to be an asset, because as I think about selling my own self to potential employers, I would like the same kind of consideration.
So Kirk was at Indiana.
Yes.
And I didn't do the Big Ten yet, but Indiana didn't do as well as when Kirk was there, right?
Yeah, but Indiana's had so much change. I mean,
They have.
If we're putting our scientist hats on, there's too many variables.
Too many variables, but maybe he is one of them. So we'll find out see how North Carolina does.
I think we'll take a look at this. We'll do some Big Ten stuff down the line. We want to wait, and because most of these Big Ten programs are combined programs, so we still have to see what happened on the men's side as well. And I'm going to stop sharing here so I can see your well lit face for a second.
Yeah, it keeps flashing. I got the low light setting on. It's not a great
every time
setting.
you move
Zoom.
your face, it adjusts the light again.
I know. Look at that. Yeah. It's annoying. Come on, Zoom.
Anything else you want to add?
No, we've been rambling on enough. But yeah, let's do this again for Pac-12s and Big Tens.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Trevor.
Okay, good. All right. See you, Chris.